The sun was a searing, indifferent eye in the pale, dusty sky, beating down upon the desolate, high plateau known only as the Ghost Shelf. It was here, miles from any sign of civilization, that Jedediah, the rancher, found the impossible silence broken by an image of absolute horror. 5 ropes, thick and crude, were tied to the withered branches of a solitary cottonwood tree, and from the ends of those ropes hung 5 figures. At first, Jedediah's heart hammered with the cold, familiar dread of finding hanged outlaws, a grim warning common in the disputed territories. He pulled his weary bay mare, Copper, to a skidding halt, the dust clouding around his worn leather duster. His intense blue eyes, perpetually narrowed against the glare, scanned the horizon for the men who had done this, his hand instinctively gripping the stock of his lever-action repeater rifle. The air was thick with the suffocating heat and the chilling, absolute stillness of death, yet as he approached, a knot of unnatural tension tightened in his gut. He dismounted slowly, the crunch of his heavy boots on the sun-baked earth echoing loudly in the immense silence. The smell of gun smoke and freshly disturbed dirt was sharp and recent. As he drew closer, the terrible truth became horrifyingly clear. The figures were 5 young Apache girls, dressed in simple, dirt-stained canvas shifts. Their small, bare feet dangled mere inches above the churned earth, tiny scratch marks in the sand below showing where they had fought desperately before succumbing to unconsciousness. But what stopped Jedediah cold, freezing the sweat on his back, was not the sight of the ropes, but the faint, rasping sound of strained breath. He saw a flicker, a near imperceptible twitch in the fingers of the eldest girl, the one hanging closest to the thick trunk. A profound, terrifying realization slammed into him: they were not dead. They were alive, barely clinging to consciousness, left to suffer a cruel, slow sentence that had not yet finished. The sight of that faint movement shattered Jedediah's cold professional caution, replacing it with a desperate, furious urgency. He grabbed his Bowie knife, its heavy blade glinting in the harsh sun, and lunged toward the first girl, the eldest. He sliced through the thick, abrasive rope just above her head, the cut clumsy and rushed, forcing the girl's limp body to drop heavily into his arms. The leather of the noose had cut deep into her neck, and her skin was blue and mottled. He laid her gently onto the scorched earth, his own breathing ragged, and immediately attacked the second rope, then the third, moving with the frantic, primal speed of a man racing against a clock he couldn't see. He ignored the burning pain in his hands and the way the desert sun hammered at his head, focusing only on the sharp, snapping sound of the ropes breaking. The air filled with the scent of raw leather and the acrid sting of dust churned by his hurried movements. Within minutes, the 5 girls lay side by side on the ground beneath the cottonwood. They were still, limp, and terrifyingly fragile, their slight bodies appearing like torn sacks on the dusty earth. Jedediah checked for pulses, finding faint, thready beats in their wrists. He pulled off his neckerchief, soaking it with the last of his canteen water, and began carefully dabbing at the raw, chafed skin around their throats. As he worked on the eldest girl, her severe, dark hair matted with sweat, her eyes fluttered open, slowly, painfully, and immediately locked onto his. Her gaze was not fearful, but utterly serious, carrying the heavy, ancient wisdom of a survival that should have been impossible. She tried to speak, forcing a weak, rasping sound past her swollen throat. Her lips cracked as she formed a single, terrified word in broken English. The word was a choked, desperate warning that instantly erased any thought of safety or retreat from Jedediah's mind. They, back soon. The broken voice was weak, but the truth of the statement was immense and undeniable. Jedediah looked around the small, secluded plateau. The wagon tracks were fresh, the ashes of a small, recent fire still faintly smoldered. The men who had committed this atrocity had not gone far and likely expected to return to find their cruel work complete. In that moment, Jedediah knew he stood at a terrifying crossroads. He could ride away now, saving himself and pretending he had never seen the 5 girls, or he could stand his ground, saving them but instantly plunging himself into a brutal war with an unknown gang, a war he would fight alone. He tightened his grip on the butt of his pistol, the choice agonizingly simple. He would not leave them to die. Jedediah stood over the 5 unconscious girls, the silence broken only by the mournful whistle of the wind whipping across the ghost shelf. The vast, empty landscape felt suddenly hostile, closing in on him. His mind raced, calculating the odds, 5 against an unknown number of men, armed and certainly ruthless, given their choice of execution. He was a rancher, a man whose code was rooted in the quiet justice of the land, not the brutal arithmetic of a gunfight. Yet, looking at the marks of the nooses, the evidence of senseless cruelty, the familiar, weary rage that had brought him west erupted inside him. He drew a long, hard breath, the dry air scratching his lungs, and made his decision, final and absolute. He moved with renewed, focused energy. Retreat was impossible. He retrieved his lever-action repeater from the saddle holster, the familiar weight and cold steel a reassurance. He quickly began establishing a defensive perimeter, dragging heavy, sun-bleached rocks and thorny scrub brush into small, strategic piles. He knew the cottonwood tree was a visual beacon, a death trap, but it was also the only shade available for the girls. He worked silently, efficiently, creating tiny pockets of cover from which he could defend the small space. The eldest girl, her name still unknown to him, watched his every move, her dark eyes clear and intense, following the patterns of his defense, a silent acknowledgement that he had chosen their fight over his safety. He returned to the girls, carefully using his knife to cut away the remaining rope fibers and the heavy, unforgiving leather nooses. The removal revealed deep, raw rope scars ringing their slender necks, a terrible brand of the injustice they had endured. Jedediah pulled out a small, tin box from his pocket containing a medicinal salve, a crude mixture of herbs and animal fat he used for treating wounds on his livestock. He applied the cool, heavy ointment gently to their raw throats, the action slow and meticulous, a quiet, desperate apology for the evil humanity had inflicted upon them. The sight of their suffering solidified his resolve. This was not a matter of law, but a fundamental right to life, and he would defend it with every round he carried. He knelt beside the eldest girl and offered her the last few drops of his precious canteen water. She drank slowly, carefully, her eyes never leaving his face. The connection was immediate and profound, 2 souls recognizing a shared moment of absolute, irreversible commitment. Jedediah spoke, his voice rough but clear, sealing his commitment to the war he had just entered. "All right," he said softly, looking out at the vast, indifferent desert. "I am not leaving this ground. They wanted you dead for what you know, and I won't let them have it." The sun began its slow, inevitable descent, casting long, menacing shadows across the ghost shelf. Jedediah stood tall within the meager defensive perimeter, his lever-action rifle held ready, its barrel glinting faintly. Behind him, the 5 girls lay motionless, the silence around them heavy with the promise of conflict. He was one man, facing the unknown fury of a brutal gang, all for a choice made in a moment of moral clarity. He was no longer just a rancher, he was a sentinel standing between life and absolute, senseless cruelty. The vast, indifferent world had forced its war upon him, and he would answer. As the desert chill descended, Jedediah finished rigging a makeshift shelter using his blanket and saddle tarp, providing a small, dark sanctuary beneath the cottonwood's dead branches. The eldest girl, whose name he still did not know, was fully awake, propped up against the rough bark. Her intense dark eyes followed his every move, but she made no sound. The other 4 girls remained unconscious, their breathing shallow but steady. Jedediah needed information, names, numbers, intentions, but he was limited to simple gestures and the few rough Apache words he had picked up over the years. He knew this girl was the key, the survivor who held the truth of the attack. He knelt before her, trying to convey his need for trust without demanding submission. Jedediah pulled a piece of dried venison jerky from his pouch, offering it to her as a silent gesture of provision and respect. She accepted the food, her fingers brushing his, and took a small, careful bite, chewing slowly, savoring the strength the meat offered. She then pointed to her 4 sisters, her dark eyes filling with a fierce, protective sorrow. She spoke, the Apache words soft but insistent, then switched to the broken, heavily accented English she had learned. Anya, she forced out, naming herself. My sisters, they are not warriors. They were taken for me. He wants the map. Her focus was not on the pain in her throat, but on the urgency of the information she needed to convey. Jedediah frowned, the word map sounding strange and utterly disconnected from the brutality he had witnessed. He knew Apache people guarded their territory fiercely, but why hang 5 innocent girls for a mere chart? Map? He questioned, his confusion evident in his voice. Gold map? Silver mine? He gestured to the surrounding mountains, trying to prompt her with the white man's motivation for cruelty. Anya shook her head slowly, a grim, knowing look passing over her face that spoke of deep, historical tragedy. She tried to sit up straighter, her dignity fighting through her weakness, determined to make the rancher understand the unique, terrifying nature of the treasure that lay at the heart of their persecution. Anya, her voice gaining a surprising strength, explained the truth behind the hanging, the true source of the gang's obsession. Not gold. Shadow map. It marks water. Every deep spring, every hidden river, every life path for 100 miles. She pointed to the dry earth. Who holds water, holds life. They want to cut us from the land. They want our people to die of thirst so they can take the land. Her eyes flashed with fierce, determined anger, revealing the conflict wasn't over wealth, but over existential control, a struggle for the very breath of life in the desert. The stakes instantly shifted from a simple robbery to an organized, ruthless act of genocide disguised as territorial dispute. Jedediah froze, the implications of her words slamming into him with the weight of cold iron. A map of the desert's vital water sources was not just valuable, it was a devastating weapon. Whoever held that map could starve out entire settlements, wipe out tribes, and control every piece of arable land in the territory. It was a power that corrupted utterly, far beyond the reach of a simple sheriff or local gang. This was the work of a powerful, organized force, using cruelty as a tool of strategic domination. His heart sank as he realized the true scale of the enemy he had invited into his life. He was no longer fighting a mere gang of outlaws, he was fighting the economic and political future of the entire territory. Anya looked at Jedediah, the momentary alliance forged by their shared crisis replaced by a deep, cautious suspicion. She had given him the central secret of her people's defense, and now she needed to know if he could be trusted. She had revealed the existence of the shadow map, but she had not revealed the orchestrator of the theft and the massacre. She spoke slowly, her words weighted with profound hatred and sorrow. They were not just outlaws. The men, they were led by the one we thought protected us. She gestured toward her neck, tracing the rope burn. He gave them the trail. He knew my camp. He helped them take me and my sisters. Jedediah followed her gaze to a spot near the remnants of the old campfire. He moved closer, kneeling down. His fingers brushed away the loose dust, revealing a small, jagged piece of shiny metal half buried in the dirt, too clean to be merely junk. He recognized the shape instantly, a small, broken fragment of a silver star, a piece of an official sheriff's badge, ripped violently away from its mooring. The sight of the metal, a symbol of law and order, lying beside the gallows, created a devastating, immediate cognitive dissonance in his mind. The betrayal was not by a nameless outlaw, but by the very authority sworn to uphold justice. Jedediah stared at the badge fragment, his mind struggling to accept the chilling implication. The law itself was tainted, the violence was official. The sheriff, he questioned, his voice a low, disbelieving growl. You mean the sheriff of Red Mesa? Elias? Anya nodded slowly, her face cold and hard as the desert stone. Elias. He pretended to patrol our borders. He gained our trust. He was given water at my mother's table. Her words were laced with the bitter sting of familial betrayal. He told the gang where the hunting path was. He led them to the shadow map's keeper. Anya recounted the memory of the betrayal in short, sharp bursts of pained revelation. She described Sheriff Elias coming to their small, hidden village years ago, professing friendship and offering official protection from the encroachment of minors. She remembered her mother offering him food and a place by the fire, teaching him simple Apache words, believing they had found a true ally within the white man's system. The memory was brief and agonizing, the false smile, the polite conversation, the methodical acquisition of sensitive knowledge about their routes and resources. Elias had been studying them, not protecting them. He had used the shield of the law to commit the most profound, calculated violation of trust. Jedediah carefully wrapped the tiny, sharp badge fragment in his handkerchief and tucked it deep into his trousers pocket. The metal felt like a hot coal against his skin, a burning reminder that the line between order and chaos had been destroyed. His initial shock dissipated, replaced by a grim, focused fury. Elias was a man Jedediah knew, a man he had grudgingly respected as the only semblance of authority in the region. The betrayal of the law was a wound that cut deep into his own sense of honor and code. He looked at Anya and the silent, broken forms of her sisters. He was no longer simply defending 5 victims, he was now fighting for the soul of the territory against a corrupt, officially sanctioned enemy. The sun rose, transforming the desolate ghost shelf into a place of stark, beautiful danger. Jedediah stood apart from the small shelter, polishing the heavy silver belt buckle that held up his worn denim trousers, a symbol of the modest wealth and independence he had built through honest ranching. He had spent his life adhering to a strict, personal code: respect the law, protect the innocent, and never interfere in matters that did not directly concern his land or his ranch. His life had been hard, but ordered. Now, his hands held the fragment of Elias's badge, a fragment of the law he was supposed to respect, forcing him to confront the shattering reality that the law itself was the problem. Anya approached him, moving quietly across the sand, her footsteps barely disturbing the dust. She saw the turmoil etched on his face, the internal war raging beneath his calm demeanor. She didn't need words to understand his dilemma. The white man's law demanded he report the girls and the badge, his conscience demanded he protect them and seek a deeper justice. She spoke softly, her voice still rough, but carrying the weight of ancient wisdom. Marshal, she guessed, using the highest title of authority she knew. You wear the code. Now, you choose the man. You go to Red Mesa, they hang us all. You run, they find us later. You stand, who do you stand for? Jedediah looked down at the tiny piece of silver in his hand, the symbol of the broken trust. He remembered his ranch, the fertile creek bed, the sturdy stone cabin, the quiet, orderly life he had built from nothing. That life was tied completely to his respect for and adherence to the established order. By choosing to hide the girls and the badge fragment, he was choosing to become an outlaw, an enemy of the established order, risking his entire future and his property. He felt the immense weight of the sacrifice, the loss of his reputation, his safety, and the possible seizure of everything he had worked for. But then he remembered the tiny scratch marks in the dirt beneath the cottonwood. He slowly, deliberately, folded his handkerchief around the badge fragment and tucked it deep into his pocket, pushing the material down until the metallic weight disappeared entirely. The action was final, irreversible. He looked at Anya, his eyes cold and clear, conveying his choice without a single word. He had decided to stand for his own law, a law rooted in the defense of life and the rejection of betrayal. I stand for the innocent, he said, his voice low and firm. Elias is not the law. He is a sickness in the territory. We will end the sickness. You tell me what happens next. Anya nodded, a flicker of fierce respect entering her eyes. The rancher had made his choice. The trust between them was solidified, forged in the heat of a shared moral commitment. She immediately shifted to action, pointing to the ridges and the dry creek bed. They will follow the wagon tracks first. They know the easy way. We take the hidden way. She began to explain the tactical routes, the old hunting trails, the places where the desert could conceal them, and the spots where an ambush could be set. Jedediah listened intently, his rancher's knowledge of the land fusing instantly with her ancient survival instincts. They were no longer two separate people, they were a united front, plotting a tactical war against the law itself. The remainder of the morning was spent in silent preparation. Jedediah retrieved his spare pistol, a worn but reliable Colt revolver, and his last pouch of extra ammunition. He knelt on the ground, meticulously stripping and cleaning his lever-action rifle, his movements calm and practiced. The scent of gun oil and cold steel filled the air, a practical antidote to the rising tension. He checked the hammer, the firing pin, and the action, ensuring every component was flawless. The work was a ritual, a silent acknowledgement of the violence that was coming and the absolute need for precision. When he was finished, he handed the spare Colt and the ammunition pouch to Anya. The trail was a 2-day journey on foot, a brutal march for the recovering girls, but it was the only way to avoid the sheriff's patrols. They would move only at night, using the deep shadows and the cold mountain air as their allies. The 4 younger girls were slowly beginning to wake, their eyes blinking against the harsh daylight, their bodies aching and confused. Anya gently comforted them, whispering in their native tongue, ensuring they understood the need for silence and absolute cooperation. Their small, fragile figures, their innocence and their suffering, became the sole, undeniable motivation for Jedediah. He packed his saddlebags with the bare minimum of supplies, leaving all unnecessary gear behind. The fight was no longer about his ranch or his pride, it was about getting these 5 innocent souls to the 3 peaks and stopping a profound evil from gaining control of the desert's most precious resource. Under the deep, star-strewn darkness, the arduous journey began. Jedediah, rifle held ready, led the 5 girls through a treacherous, winding rocky canyon, a route known only to experienced trackers. The girls, though weak, moved with a silent, disciplined efficiency that spoke of generations of hard-won survival. Anya, the eldest, walked last, her dark eyes constantly sweeping the rear, reading the shadows and listening for the telltale sound of distant hoofbeats. The journey was slow, brutal, and utterly silent, the only sound the faint scuff of their moccasins on the shale. Every hour of walking was a victory, every mile a step further away from the sheriff's cruel grasp. They paused briefly near a cold, hidden spring, a natural break known only to the Apache. Jedediah watched as Anya moved with quiet focus, ensuring her sisters drank slowly and sparingly. He noticed the speed of her recovery, the weakness in her step was gone, replaced by a fierce, nervous energy. She was healing, driven by the urgency of their mission. As she knelt by the spring, the water reflecting the starlight, Jedediah approached her. He spoke quietly, "They will be moving fast. Elias knows the shortest route. We need to be faster." Anya looked up, her expression grim. "They will send outriders," she warned. "They will split up. They are hunting ghosts." The silence of the mountain night was suddenly shattered by the sharp, undeniable crack of a distant rifle shot, echoing menacingly through the rocky canyons. Jedediah froze, his hand snapping onto his rifle. The sound was too close, too purposeful to be a hunter. Elias had found their trail, or at least the trail of Jedediah's horse and wagon. The pursuit had changed from a blind search to a focused, organized hunt. They were exposed, and their secret route was no longer safe. Jedediah looked at the immense, towering peaks, then at the 5 small figures huddled behind him. They had to abandon their careful, slow pace and risk the faster, more exposed route. Jedediah and Anya quickly coordinated the dangerous new plan. "We split them," Jedediah whispered, his voice intense. "I take the high ridge, draw the main patrol. You and the girls continue on the low trail toward the 3 peaks. If I draw them into the North Canyon, you can make the distance." Anya nodded immediately, understanding the impossible risk he was taking. She knew he was offering himself as bait, sacrificing his safety for their escape. She looked at him, her eyes fierce with resolve. "I do not run from my enemy," she said. "I take the sisters. But I wait for you at the Great Rock." Jedediah mounted Copper and rode quickly, sharply away from the spring, choosing the steep, treacherous path toward the high ridge. He fired 2 loud, deliberate shots into the cold, still air, a clear signal designed to draw the attention of the trackers. The sound was immediately answered by distant, excited shouts. As the sound of his horse's hooves faded, Anya and the four girls vanished instantly, melting into the shadows of the rocks with the silent efficiency of wind. Jedediah had chosen the path of the target, Anya chose the path of the hunter. Jedediah rode Copper hard and fast along the steep, rocky ridge. He glanced back, seeing the faint, bobbing lights of lanterns marking the main patrol far below. But then he saw two distinct figures break away from the main group, two outriders, faster and more skilled, taking the high ground directly toward him. They were sharp, focused trackers, and they were gaining ground. He knew they were not Elias himself, but professional killers hired for the hunt. Jedediah forced Copper to a new burst of speed, drawing the riders further into the narrow, winding North Canyon, the perfect place for a brief, sharp engagement. He plunged off the trail into a thicket of scrub oak, tying Copper quickly but securely to a sturdy root, giving the mare a reassuring pat. He didn't have time to dig in, so he relied on a quick, crude trap, a barely visible trip wire of leather and stone stretched across the narrow path behind him, designed only to stall them. He then moved swiftly to a small outcrop of rock, chambering around into his rifle. He lay flat, the cold stone pressing against his chest, the scent of pine and dust heavy in the air. His breathing was hard and ragged, but his focus was absolute. He was ready for the ambush. The sound of the two riders was heavy, loud, and confident. They entered the canyon path at a dangerous speed, their figures silhouetted against the dark sky. The lead rider, a stocky man in a dark hat, hit the trip wire instantly. His horse whinnied in pain and stumbled, throwing the man hard onto the rocky ground. The second rider, quicker and more seasoned, pulled his horse up short and immediately drew his pistol, scanning the canyon walls for the ambush. He saw the faint outline of Jedediah's position and fired a quick, sharp shot that whizzed perilously close to the rancher's head. Jedediah returned fire instantly, the blast of his lever-action rifle loud and brutal in the confined space. He fired once at the second rider, hitting him squarely, sending the man tumbling from his saddle with a cry that was immediately cut short. He then aimed quickly at the first rider, who was struggling to get up from the ground, injured and disoriented. Jedediah fired a second, decisive shot, silencing the threat. He waited, listening to the heavy silence that followed the gunfire, watching for any sign of movement. The two outriders were dead, their horses gone, their mission failed. The first part of the reckoning was complete. Jedediah moved quickly and efficiently, retrieving the outriders' rifles and water skins, valuable resources for the long journey ahead. He checked his own supplies, finding a graze on his left arm, a superficial wound that could wait. He remounted Copper, taking a moment to calm the mare, and then plunged into a different, highly complicated route, a series of silent game trails and switchbacks, designed to throw any remaining trackers completely off his scent. He had bought Anya and her sister's time, and he had confirmed his commitment to the war. He rode toward the agreed-upon meeting spot, the great rock beneath the three peaks, determined to rejoin the people he was now sworn to protect. Jedediah reached the prearranged meeting spot, a massive, wind-carved natural stone arch near the base of the three peaks, just as the first pale light of dawn touched the horizon. Anya and the four girls were waiting. They were huddled in the shadows, silent, their eyes wide with fear and relief. Jedediah dismounted, exhausted, his body aching, his arm bleeding, but his eyes were clear and resolved. The silence between them was thick with respect and the knowledge of the sacrifice he had just made. He had delivered them safely to the foot of their ancestral sanctuary. Their relief was short-lived. Minutes later, the sound of heavy horses and angry voices filled the canyon. Sheriff Elias, mounted on a massive black gelding, rode into the clearing with 4 deputies, his face a mask of rage and righteous indignation. He was flanked by his men, their rifles pointed directly at Jedediah and the girls. Elias stopped, his ornate silver badge reflecting the harsh sunlight, a symbol of the official power he believed was absolute. Jedediah. Elias bellowed, his voice thick with authority. You are harboring criminals. You will surrender the savage girls now, or you will be judged a traitor. Jedediah stepped forward, standing between Elias and the 5 girls. He reached down and slowly, deliberately, unbuckled the heavy silver belt buckle that symbolized his ranch, his wealth, and his commitment to the white man's order. He let the buckle fall to the ground with a dull thunk, a loud, final rejection of his past life and the code Elias represented. He drew his Colt pistol, aiming it directly at the sheriff, his eyes cold and unwavering. "Your law died back on the ghost shelf, Elias," Jedediah stated, his voice calm and firm. "You murdered the innocent and used your badge to steal their survival. I choose a better law." Before Elias could react, before the deputies could open fire, Anya stepped out from the shadows, her dark hair braided tightly, her eyes burning with ancestral fury. She held the bone-handled ceremonial knife high, a primal figure of justice. Elias, seeing the true face of the wronged, faltered, his expression shifting from anger to genuine terror. Anya did not speak. She was not a victim begging for clemency, she was the reckoning itself, standing as the embodiment of the life he had tried to extinguish. The deputies, caught between the rancher's gun and the girl's terrible resolve, hesitated, their formations breaking. The fight was swift and brutal. Seeing the break in the ranks, Jedediah fired first, his shot aimed perfectly, hitting Elias in the shoulder, sending the sheriff tumbling from his horse, his ornate badge scraping uselessly on the rock. The sight of their leader falling, wounded and betrayed, shattered the deputies' resolve. Jedediah fired a warning shot over their heads, and the men, trained for intimidation, not true confrontation, quickly turned their horses and rode away in chaotic, cowardly retreat. The silence returned, heavy with the weight of spent violence, leaving only Jedediah, Anya, and the terrified girls standing beneath the stone arch. The rising sun cast a magnificent, golden light over the 3 peaks, bathing the stone arch in warmth. Jedediah was tending to the superficial wound on his arm, his movement slow with exhaustion but steady. Elias and his badge were gone, left on the ground, a physical symbol of the corruption they had defeated. Anya and her sisters were safe, having reached the entrance to the ancient caves where their grandfather waited. The battle was won, but the cost was absolute. Jedediah was now an outlaw, a man with no home, no reputation, and no law to protect him. Anya approached Jedediah, her fierce eyes soft with gratitude and respect. She walked to him, returned the bone-handled knife, and then, in a quiet, profound gesture, she placed her hand over his heart, looking directly into his eyes. It was the ceremonial embrace of her people, an ancient acknowledgement of courage, honor, and acceptance into their extended family. "You are not an outlaw," she stated, her voice clear. "You are one of us. You chose the right law." The 4 younger girls emerged from the shadows, their eyes wide and grateful, surrounding Jedediah with a new, quiet circle of belonging. Jedediah looked down at his silver belt buckle, lying abandoned on the dust, the final, physical tie to the world he had left behind. He did not pick it up. He left the symbol of his former life on the ground, a testament to the sacrifice he had willingly made. He mounted Copper, now riding toward the dark, inviting entrance of the mountain pass where Anya and her sisters waited. He was no longer a rancher bound by the white man's code, he was a guardian, bound by the stronger code of the innocent. Jedediah rode into the heart of the mountains, the 5 girls walking beside him, leading him toward their grandfather and the safe haven of the caves. He was riding into an uncertain future, but he was riding with a clear conscience and a new family. The camera lingers on the discarded silver belt buckle and the broken sheriff's badge, lying side by side on the cold, indifferent stone, symbols of the law that had failed and the dignity that had triumphed. Jedediah chose his family, and he chose his truth. The badge he wore was not made of silver, but of courage. The law he upheld was not written on paper, but forged in the heat of a crisis. Sometimes, the most honorable path requires you to tear down the world you know, just to build a better one. Tell me, my friends, would you have left your life and your ranch behind to stand against the law? Let me know in the comments below, and subscribe to the channel for more stories of true justice in the Wild West.